My stepson locked the door. What I saw through the keyhole changed everything. It all started on a quiet Sunday afternoon. One of those days where nothing seems out of the ordinary until everything changes. I was walking down the hallway, heading toward the kitchen, when I noticed something strange. My stepson, Ethan, had locked his bedroom door. That might not sound like a big deal to most people, but in our house, we've always had an open-door policy. It's how we built trust. It's how we stayed close as a blended family. So when I saw that door locked, tightly shut with no noise coming from inside, I felt that uneasy feeling crawl up my spine. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. Teenagers need privacy, right? Maybe he was just playing video games or talking to a friend. But something didn't feel right. The silence behind that door wasn't normal. There was no music, no laughter, not even the sound of movement. Just stillness. That's when I leaned in, gently pressing my ear against the wood, and then, out of pure instinct, I don't even know why, I lowered myself and peeked through the keyhole. What I saw on the other side wasn't anything I could have prepared for. It wasn't dangerous, and it wasn't anything illegal or violent, but it was something that completely shifted how I saw Ethan, and maybe even myself. In that moment, through that tiny sliver of space, years of assumptions, unspoken feelings, and little signs I had ignored suddenly came into sharp focus. It was like a window into his private world, and what I witnessed made my heart ache in a way I didn't expect. I stood frozen, unsure whether to knock, to speak, or to walk away quietly. But one thing was clear, after that moment, nothing between us would ever be the same again. I stayed there for a few seconds longer, holding my breath like the air itself might give me away. I backed away slowly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. My mind was spinning. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had just seen. Ethan, sitting on the floor with a look on his face I'd never seen before. His eyes were red, not from anger or allergies, but from crying. He wasn't on his phone or playing a game or doing anything that would explain locking the door. He was just sitting there, surrounded by scattered papers, with his head in his hands like the weight of the world was pressing down on him. I walked to the living room and sat down, trying to make sense of it. Ethan's been quiet lately, but I thought it was just the usual teenage mood swings. He's always been more on the quiet side since his mom and I got married 2 years ago. Blending families isn't easy. At first, he seemed open, polite, respectful, even curious about me. But over time, he started pulling back. Less talk at the dinner table, more time in his room. I thought he was just adjusting, or maybe going through a phase. I didn't want to push too hard. I didn't want to be that stepdad. But now I was questioning everything. Had I missed something deeper? Something he didn't feel he could talk about? My wife, Sarah, hadn't mentioned anything unusual either, but maybe she didn't know. Or maybe Ethan was good at hiding it. And that's what scared me. The idea that he could be in pain, and we didn't even see it. That maybe he didn't feel safe enough to let us in. I thought about those papers. From the glimpse I got, they didn't look like school assignments. They looked personal. Some were torn. One had big black marker lines scribbled through it like he was trying to erase something, maybe a drawing or words. What could he be going through that he had to shut the door and hide from the world? From us?
I wanted to talk to him right then.
To knock and ask if he was okay. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear of pushing too hard, of making it worse. Or maybe deep down I knew this was bigger than a locked door. Something was unraveling, and I had no idea where it would lead. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying that moment over and over again, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Every sound from down the hall made me sit up and listen. Was he still awake? Was he crying again? I didn't know, and not knowing was eating at me. The quiet in the house wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy, like we were all tiptoeing around something none of us wanted to name. The next morning at breakfast, Ethan didn't come downstairs. Sarah didn't seem too concerned. She just assumed he was sleeping in and would grab something later.
I almost said something.
I opened my mouth to bring it up, but the words got stuck in my throat. How do you tell a mother that you saw her son crying alone behind a locked door without sounding like you invaded his privacy? And what if she brushed it off like I was overthinking? Instead, I asked casually, "Has Ethan seemed okay to you lately?" Sarah looked up from her coffee, puzzled. "Yeah, I guess. I mean, he's been quiet, but that's just Ethan." I nodded, pretending that was enough, but inside I knew it wasn't. Something had changed, and I was starting to wonder if this had been going on a lot longer than I thought. Later that day, I found something odd in the laundry room. Tucked between two towels on the shelf was a small notebook. It wasn't mine. I opened it just a crack, enough to see that it was Ethan's handwriting. The pages were filled with short phrases, most of them scribbled out. A few I could still read. Not good enough. They don't see me, and why bother?
My heart sank.
It wasn't just sadness, it was deeper. Like he was carrying something alone for a long time, and no one noticed. That's when I started to think about school. He used to talk about his friends, about gaming, little jokes, stories from class. But recently, nothing. No names, no updates, no mentions of plans. I wondered if something happened. Bullying? Trouble with a friend group? Or maybe it was something else entirely, something inside him he didn't know how to talk about. Either way, it was clear. He was shutting down. I put the notebook back where I found it untouched. Whatever was going on, I couldn't ignore it anymore. But rushing in might push him further away. So I waited, hoping for an opening, not knowing what I'd do if it never came. The house felt different that week. Not louder, not busier, just tense. Like something was waiting to happen. I tried to act normal around Ethan, giving him space, but keeping an eye out. He barely said a word. Came down for meals, nodded when spoken to, then disappeared back into his room. The door stayed shut. I didn't look through the keyhole again, but I found myself staring at that door more than I should have. Wondering what was going on behind it. Wondering how deep the silence really went. Sarah still didn't notice anything. She was caught up with work and prepping for a conference she was attending out of town. When she left that Friday morning, I thought maybe I'd have a chance to talk to Ethan, just the two of us. No pressure.
Just try to connect.
But when I knocked on his door around noon, there was no answer. I waited, knocked again. Nothing. That uneasy feeling returned, crawling under my skin. I called his name, gently at first, then louder. Still nothing. I pressed my ear against the door. I could hear faint rustling, like fabric moving. I exhaled, partly relieved, partly more worried. He was in there, but still not answering. I debated knocking again. Instead, I turned away and walked to the living room, trying not to let my thoughts get ahead of me. That evening, something strange happened. I was passing his room when I saw a small folded paper on the floor, pushed just barely outside his door. At first, I thought it was trash, but when I picked it up, I realized it was left there on purpose. My name was written on it in small, shaky letters. Tom. I opened it slowly, my chest tightening with every second. The note was short. Just a few lines. I don't want to talk. I can't explain everything. But I didn't want you to think I hate you. I just don't know how to be in this house sometimes. I read it twice. 3 times. The words stung more than I expected. Not because he was angry, but because he was hurting and trying to reach out in his own quiet way. He didn't hate me. He was lost. And I didn't know if he wanted help or just needed to be left alone. As the night crept in, the house fell into silence again. I stayed on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but I was listening. Every creak, every shift in the walls made me sit up straight. Around midnight, I heard the softest footsteps. Then the kitchen faucet. Then nothing. I got up to check, careful not to startle him. The kitchen light was on. A glass sat on the counter. No sign of him. But when I turned back toward the hallway, I froze. His bedroom door was cracked open just barely. For the first time in days. I stepped closer, heart pounding, unsure of what I was walking into. The hallway felt colder than usual. My fingers brushed the edge of the door. I pushed it open, slow, almost afraid of what I'd find. What I saw inside made me stop in my tracks. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of his desk lamp. The curtains were drawn tight, making everything feel even more closed off. Ethan was sitting at his desk, his back to me. Headphones on. Shoulders tense. I hesitated at the doorway, not wanting to startle him. I gently called his name, but he didn't react. Either he didn't hear me, or he was pretending not to. Then I saw it, the papers. The same ones from before, now more scattered. Some pinned to the wall, others laid out in an organized mess on his desk and bed. I stepped in quietly, and that's when I noticed what they were. They weren't just doodles or notes. They were letters.
Dozens of them.
Some written to his mom. Some to someone named C. I didn't know who that was at first, but one letter, folded open in the corner, made my stomach twist. Dear C, I don't know who else to talk to. I thought I could tell Mom or Tom, but they wouldn't get it. You're the only one who really saw me. I froze. My eyes scanned the rest. Some letters were full of emotion, sadness, anger, confusion. Others looked like they were written in a rush, then scratched out with red ink like he regretted them immediately. But the most unsettling part wasn't the letters. It was the envelope taped to the wall. It had my name on it again, Tom, but this one wasn't like the note from earlier. It was thicker, sealed, and right next to it was a printed photo. I stepped closer, heart pounding, and saw the photo was of Ethan and another boy, both smiling, arms over each other's shoulders, standing by what looked like a school hallway. It was dated 2 years ago. I had never seen that picture before. On the back, in Ethan's handwriting, were just 3 words. He saved me. The name C suddenly made sense. The friend, or maybe something more. Someone he lost, or had to leave behind. The mystery deepened. What happened to C? Where was he now? Why was Ethan writing to him like he was gone? Ethan still hadn't turned around. I didn't know if he even realized I was fully in the room now. My eyes went back to the letters, and something caught my attention. One folded page with a school crest on it. I unfolded it just enough to see it was a disciplinary report. My heart sank as I read the words, verbal altercation, bullying, and temporary suspension. Ethan's name was listed as the student involved, but not the aggressor, the target. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Everything suddenly aligned. The isolation, the shut door, the crying, the letters. He had been carrying something heavy, maybe for years. And no one saw it, not even me. But just as I started to step forward to say something, Ethan spoke, still facing the wall. I know you read them. His voice was calm, almost too calm. It's okay. You were supposed to. I stood there, stunned. His voice was steady, but I could feel the weight behind it. Slowly, Ethan turned to face me. His eyes were red again, but not just from crying. There was something raw in them. Like he'd made peace with what he was about to say, even if I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't going to tell anyone, he said. But then I realized maybe someone needed to hear it. I walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, unsure what to say. So, I didn't say anything. I just listened. He picked up one of the letters and held it in his hands. C wasn't just a friend. He was the first person who really saw me. At school, when things got bad, when the other kids started spreading rumors, saying things, they all backed away. But not him. He stayed. I nodded slowly, piecing it all together. The silence, the letters, the hidden pain, it was all about loss. About identity. About the fear of being misunderstood in your own home. He moved away last year, Ethan continued. And after that, everything got worse. The school stuff, the bullying. I tried to talk to Mom, but I didn't know how. And I thought you'd just think it was a phase or something. His voice cracked a little, and I felt a knot rise in my throat. I wouldn't have, I said quietly. I didn't know, Ethan. But I'm here now.
I'm listening.
He finally looked at me fully. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't seem guarded. There was pain, but also a little relief. We sat there for a while, not saying much. Just sitting in the silence that finally didn't feel so heavy. Then, just when I thought everything had been laid out, Ethan said something that pulled the ground out from under me. I think he's back in town, he said, eyes focused on the letter in his hands. I saw him 2 days ago, at the gas station near school. But he looked right at me and walked away. I stared at him, stunned. You're sure it was him? He nodded. I'm sure. And I think he's hiding something too. In that moment, I realized the story wasn't over. One mystery had unraveled, but another had just begun. C and I talked for nearly an hour that day. He wasn't a villain, just a teenager who had also been overwhelmed. When his family moved suddenly, he hadn't known how to say goodbye. He admitted he'd written Ethan once or twice, but after getting no reply, he assumed Ethan had moved on or didn't want to talk. Neither of them realized they were both sitting in silence, waiting for the other to speak first. It was a painful truth, but an honest one. Asked C if he'd be willing to talk to Ethan again. There was a long pause before he nodded. If he wants to see me, I'll be there, he said. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real. That's all Ethan needed, someone real. When I got home and told Ethan everything, I could see the hesitation in his eyes. Part of him wanted to forget it all, to avoid the weight of facing C again. But a bigger part of him, the part that had written all those letters, that had waited quietly for someone to listen, wanted closure. Maybe even connection. A week later, they met in the park. I stayed back, watching from a distance, heart in my throat. They sat on the bench for a while, not saying much at first. But eventually, the words started to flow. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. I could tell by their faces that something good was happening. Something healing. After that day, Ethan slowly began to change. He started leaving his door open again. We'd talk casually, nothing forced. One evening, he even joined me in the kitchen to help cook dinner, a small moment that felt huge. Sarah noticed too, though she never quite knew the full story. Ethan didn't want her to worry, and I respected that. What mattered most was that he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. The letters, the silence, the locked door, all of it had been signs. Not of rebellion, but of a boy trying to be understood in a world that often speaks too loudly and listens too little. If there's one thing I took from this experience, it's that the smallest signs, tears behind a closed door, a note slipped under the crack, can hold the biggest meanings. And sometimes, what we see through the keyhole isn't something to fear. It's a chance to finally open the door.